he was meditating always on the lotus feet of the Lord. And then finally, he ruled the material world just to honor the orders of his superiors. So being submissive to the first was being submissive to Krishna, and this is being submissive to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Right? So uh, the crux is the point that was made earlier on. Externally, he was engaged, but internally, he was disengaged. So Prabhupada says the word Manavardhana Mahatam, just to show honor to superiors, is significant. Although Maharaj Priyavat was already a liberated person and had no attraction for material things, he engaged himself fully in government affairs just to show respect to Lord Brahma. And then Prabhupada says that Arjun did the same thing. That he was not interested in fighting the battle, but when he was ordered to do so by Krishna, he executed his duties. So Prabhupada also elaborates on how a devotee can stay engaged under all circumstances. Right? So he says that a devotee who is actually advanced is not afraid of anything, provided he has the opportunity to execute the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada's example, that even though he was a sannyasi, to execute the order of his guru, which is as good as the order of the Lord, he undertook several risks. Right? Whether it was leaving Vrindavan, leaving the country, coming into an environment that was definitely not conducive to spiritual advancement. Right? But all he did that because he was fearless in the shelter of the Lord. Right? So Prabhupada's name of nation was Abhay Charan Arvinda, the one who is fearless at the feet of the Lord. Okay, verse 24.
Thereafter, Maharaja Privrata married Bharismati, the daughter of the Prajapati named Vishwakarma. In her begot 10 sons equal to him in beauty, character, magnanimity, and other qualities. He also begot a daughter, the youngest of all, named Urjaswati.
So in the Sanskrit, in the first line, it says Uhavava Atmajan. So Prabhupada comments that the word Uhavava. So Uhavava is an expression of wonderment. It's like, is it possible? How is it possible? So what is the wonderment that is being expressed by Sukadeva Goswami? That from being a fully renounced brahmachari, he now is married to Varishmati. And not only is he married to her, he also has 10 sons in her. So Varishmati is described as the daughter of Vishwakarma. So this Vishwakarma is not the demigod Vishwakarma that is responsible for construction. This is a Prajapati in the ancient times by the name of Vishwakarma. So Prabhupada says, it is a source of great wonder, therefore, that Priyavrata Maharaj, who had followed the path of renunciation, now accepted the path of enjoyment. So one may comment that Lord Brahma did not instruct Priyavrata Maharaj to marry and have children. Right? He instructed him to take over the ruling of the kingdom. So why did he have a wife? And then why did he have sons? So Srila Prabhupada explains that when one is following an ashram, then one needs to follow it completely. So, so when Priyavrata took on the role of being an emperor, a king, then it is also the duty of that varna and ashram to have a queen and to produce progeny to carry the lineage. So the point is that one should not do a service half-heartedly. Like it should not be like Prayoga said, okay, I've been asked to rule, but let me rule minimally and let me stay a brahmachari and let me delegate all the responsibilities to the minister and I'll build a kutir and do nirjan bhajan. When he accepted the instructions of Brahma, the quality of a great person and a great devotee is that they embrace it completely. So Priyavrata not only took on the rulership of the kingdom, he also took on all the responsibilities of a king, which is having a queen and having children. So, like we see in the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu was only 24 when he took sannyas. But before that, he married twice. Because that was that ashram that he was there. Right? So when Mahaprabhu is omniscient, he could have said, let me not marry and simply take sannyas. But he married first Lakshmi Priya. When she left her body, he married again Vishnu Priya. So because he was perfectly executing the duties of that ashram. When Mahaprabhu was a student, then he was a great scholar as a brahmachari. Right? That was the ashram that required one to study scriptures, to um, teach at the same time, and Mahaprabhu was following that completely in its entirety. So Prabhupada also talks about more at that time the more contemporary topic of Prabhupada uh, participating in arranging and performing marriages for his disciples. Right, so there was some criticism that was leveled against him, and Prabhupada would sometimes himself say that I'm a sannyasi, I have nothing to do with this. But still, he says that for the welfare of my disciples and the society as a whole, he was doing it. So we know very early on, almost after the first 11 devotees were initiated by Prabhupada. Right after that, he married two of the Mukund Maharaj and Janaki. He married them. I mean, they were already in a relationship, and then Prabhupada said that it's not proper now that you're initiated. The relationship becomes illicit, so it's better for you to marry. So he married them, and after that, he did many marriages. Even though later on he became a little bit uh, he became a little bit more careful, because when he saw that marriages were ending up in separation, then he became a little bit more careful in either arranging or doing marriages. And it was mostly done later on by the temple presidents and senior devotees there. But Prabhupada mentioned his intention. He says that in the purport, he says he was marrying off the disciples not because he wanted to propagate the Varnashram Dharma, but because he wanted to propagate the Devi Varnashram Dharma, where the two persons come together in marriage for the purpose of cultivating bhakti, or whether they have children or a family. The difference between Devi Varnashram and other Varnashram is that everything is centered around Krishna. When one studies uh, the scriptures. When one works, then they use the money for Krishna service. When one marries, it is for the purpose of um, providing an environment for both the husband and the wife and the children later on to make spiritual advancement. And similarly, later on, when the vanaprastha is done or sannyas is done, everything is done really to make progress in devotional life. Okay, verse 25.
The 10 sons of Maharaja Prevrata were named Agnidra, Idmajva, Yagnabahu, Mahavira, Hiranvareta, Grutaprastha, Savana, Medhatithi, Vitihotra, and Kavi. These are also names of Agni, the fire god.
So this is the lineage of Maharaj Prevrata. Okay, moving on, verse 26.
3 among these 10, namely Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, lived in complete celibacy, thus trained in brahmachari life from the beginning of childhood. They were very conversant with the highest perfection, known as the Paramahamsa Ashrama.
So Prabhupada glorifies the brahmachari ashram over here. He says that Urdhva Retasa is significant. So Urdhva means going upwards, and Retaha means semen. So those who are completely celibate, in them they are able to raise their semen to their brain, and it nourishes the brain. So Prabhupada says that one who can completely control sex life is to work wonderfully with his brain, especially in remembering. Thus, students who simply hear Vedic instructions once from the teacher could remember them verbatim. So these are known as Shrutidhar, that they hear once. And earlier times, almost everybody was Shrutidhar. So we see uh, uh, when the mantras were given, the guru would give it, recite it only once, and the students would completely learn it. Or when the Vedas were being divided, then the gurus would, before the Vedas were written, the gurus would sit and recite the Vedas. The students would sit and listen, and because they were Shrutidharas, they would completely remember it. Now it's rare to be there, but there are. It's not. Um, uh, I mean, it's not impossible. There are people who are known to have this ability to have a memory in which they retain everything they uh, they hear. Danvir Goswami has a book called Brain Game, which talks more about the influence of celibacy on the brain, and he looks at it both from the Vedic perspective and also from the scientific perspective. He makes this point that um, uh, uh, that the chemical that is used to nourish the memory cells in the brain is also used in the production of semen. So, uh, uh, because by evolution the body is designed to preserve itself, when there is discharge of semen, the body simply directs everything to the production of semen, because that is essential in the reproduction and the perpetuation of the species. But if the semen is retained, then that chemical, I think it was selenium or something like that, that basically then gets repurposed in nourishing the brain cell. So it makes the point that even though here it is said to some extent symbolically that the semen rises to the brain, but one way to understand is that uh, the nutrients in the body that are used to nourish the semen are now redirected to nourishing the brain. So Prabhupada says that that uh, uh, I'm sorry, Sukadeva Goswami says that uh, they were conversant with the highest perfection known as the Paramahamsa ashram. So, so they were lifelong brahmacharis. They never involved themselves in any other affairs, and they achieved spiritual perfection. Okay, verse 27. So I got a long translation. Please go ahead, Prabhu.
Thus situated in the renounced order from the beginning of their lives, all three of them completely controlled the activities of their senses and thus became great saints. They concentrated their minds always upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the resting place of the totality of living entities, and who is therefore celebrated as Vasudeva. Lord Vasudeva is the only shelter of those who are actually afraid of material existence. By constantly thinking of his lotus feet, these three sons of Maharaja Prevrata became advanced in pure devotional service. By the prowess of their devotional service, they could directly perceive the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart as the Super Soul, and realize that there was qualitatively no difference between themselves and him.
So the verse talks about the progression of these three great personalities. So the important thing to note here is that in itself, austerities or celibacy, they don't mean much. They are a means to an end, but not an end in themselves, right? So because they were following strictly celibacy, they were able to control the senses. But then what did they do? What did they do with this mind that was fully under their control? So Sukadeva Goswami says that now this is what makes them great. That they took this mind and they focused it at the lotus feet of the personality of God, right? And then he glorifies the Lord, that he is the resting place of everyone. So this is one of the translations of the word Vasudev, right? So Vas means to live. So one of the meanings of Vasudev is one who lives everywhere, and that is Paramatma. One of the translations of Vasudev is where everyone lives. Let's say here that translation is used. That who is the resting place of the living entities of everyone. So by constantly thinking of his lotus feet, they became advanced. Right? So that was the real catalyst to their devotional advancement. Not celibacy, not control of senses, not ability to have an advanced mind. They were all useful. But the fact that they were able to take this and use it to, to offer it to Krishna. So ultimately, and this is in the last line, ultimately it was by the prowess of the devotional service only they could directly perceive the Lord. In the purport Srila Prabhupada gives, he does that a few times in the past also. He gives a brief description about the different stages of sannyas. So he said there are four stages: Kutichak, Baudak, Parivracharya, and Paramhamsa. Right? So Kutichak is that when the person leaves, he leaves the village but does not go far. So he builds a village in the forest. He builds a hut in the forest near the village, but then his wife or his son or whoever will come and take care of his needs. So they will supply him with food or whatever necessities that are there. So that is Kutichak. Then Bahudak. Bahudak means many places. So the person is now not dependent on the house, but does madhukari. which means he goes from place to place begging. Prabhupada says the profession of the bumblebees. The bees goes from different flowers to collect nectar. So similarly, the sannyasi at this stage, he starts going to different places to beg. If he gets something, then he eats. If he does not get something, then he will fast. And uh, um, and then there are some different restrictions also that uh, um, should not go to more than 7 houses, should not collect more than what is needed. Suppose he goes to the first house and gets whatever is needed, you should not think I have still 6 more houses to go. So should only collect what is needed and should not plan for the next day. Mahaprabhu once got very upset at his servant Govinda because he had collected some special kind of, I believe it was a special kind of rice that was Prabhupada's favorite, not Prabhupada, Mahaprabhu's favorite. And when Mahaprabhu realized that he had collected more, because he said, I'll cook some tomorrow also, then he was furious. He said, you have the mentality of a grahastha. You should leave me right away. And so he orders him to leave because he considers that to be a violation of the uh, duties of a sannyas. Then, when a sannyasi becomes even more advanced, then is known as a parivragacharya. So, parivragacharya is one who travels to preach. Right. So they travel worldwide, and the main intention is to reach the glories of Krishna. And when he becomes even more advanced, then he's at the Paramhamsa stage, when he gives up his traveling, he sits down at one place and he focuses internally. That Prabhupada says an actual Paramahansa is one who completely controls his senses and engages in the unalloyed service of the Lord. So the 3 sons of Priyavrata, Kavi, Mahavir, and Savan, were situated in the Paramhamsa stage from the very beginning. And so the main characteristic of the Paramhamsa stage is that their complete control of the senses. Literally, Paramhamsa means Hamsa means swan. So the swan has the ability to, if you give it milk and water mixed, it will drink the milk and leave the water. So a devotee at this stage, they only accept whatever is needed for devotional advancement. So even though the world may be around them may be materially contaminated, but they will only take that much that is needed for their spiritual advancement, and they leave everything else, which means they have complete control of the senses. So these 3 sons of Priyavrata, they were at the Paramhamsa stage from the very beginning. And Prabhupada says, why? He says, because their senses were completely engaged in serving the Lord. Therefore, the 3 brothers were described in this verse as Upsham Shila. So Upsham means completely subdued. Because they completely subdued their senses, they are understood to have been great sages and saints. Okay, next verse 28.
In his other wife, Maharaja Priyavrata begot 3 sons, named Uttama, Tamasa, and Raivata. All of them later took charge of Manvantara millenniums.
So now we are seeing the lineage of Maharaj Priyavrata, that 3 of his sons will become Manus. So he's in the first Manvantara. Then Uttam, Tamas, and Raivat will become Manus in the 3rd, 4th, and the 5th Manvantara. And Then the sixth mantra would be Chakshusha Manu, and the seventh mantra in which we are is Vaivastha Manu. So only the second mantra is not a descendant of Priyavratha, Swaroisha, who is the son of Agni. Prabhupada gives a little bit of the duration also, so that in one lifespan of Manu, there are 71 Divya Yugas. Each one of them is 4.32 million years. Almost all of them came from the family of Maharaj Priyavratha. Three of them are particularly mentioned here, namely Uttam, Tamas, and Raivat. So if you remember, Raivat Manu is also the father of Revati, and Revati later on becomes the wife of Lord Balaram. Okay, moving on, verse 29.
After Kavi, Mahavira and Savana were completely trained in the Paramahamsa stage of life, Maharaja Privrata ruled the universe for 11 arbudas of years. Whenever he was determined to fix his arrow upon his bowstring with his two powerful arms, all opponents of the regulative principles of religious life would flee from his presence in fear of the unparalleled prowess he displayed in ruling the universe. He greatly loved his wife, Brihaspati, and with the increase of days, their exchange of nuptial love also increased. By her feminine behavior as she dressed herself, walked, got up, smiled, laughed, and glanced about, Queen Brihaspati increased his energy. Thus, although he was a great soul, he appeared lost in the feminine conduct of his wife. He behaved with her just like an ordinary man, but actually he was a great soul.
So this verse describes the rule of Maharaj Priyavratha. It will expand more later on. So he ruled the universe for 11 arbudas. And one arbuda is described to be of 100 million years. This is as per Sridhar Goswami, and Jiva Goswami describes it as 10 million years. So regardless, it's a very long time. So whether it was for 110 million years or 11 times 100 million years, so he ruled for a very, very long time. And but how did he rule? That is described briefly over here. That he was always ready to punish those who opposed the regulative principles of religious lives. Right. So that is the main responsibility of the king, to make sure that the citizens are making proper advancement. So so even though Maharaj Priyavratha had a soft heart, was a great devotee, but does not mean that he was soft on the offenders, because that would be detrimental to others, right? So the king keeps the bigger picture, because if he allowed one person to violate the principles of the scriptures, then that would either inspire other peoples to follow or disturb them, right? So he was very firm in punishing them. Then what about at home? So earlier on, there was a lot of talk about the renunciation of Privarta Maharaj, but now we see that he was extremely attached to his wife. He says he greatly loved Varismati, and the exchange of nuptial love also increased. So the feminine behavior of his wife is described, and what is also described is that it seemed to cover him. So the point that is made over here is it is difficult to judge great personalities externally, because in the last line it is said that actually he was a great soul. So earlier on we said that when he entered the ashram, he entered with full commitment, and part of Grahastha ashram is enjoying with the wife, is being attracted to the wife, is it said that whenever she dressed up, walked up, smiled, glanced about, it increased his energy, right? So being inspired by the wife. So one would say that, but this is how an ordinary householder behaves. So Sukdev Goswami says, maybe, but actually he was a great soul. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that the Priyavat Maharaj is described in this verse as Mahamana, to indicate that he appeared to be lost in the affection of his wife, Barismati. His conduct was difficult for ordinary persons to discern, because he was simultaneously attached and detached. Okay. So we'll do one more verse. After that, we'll pause for any discussion. Go ahead and read the translation, Prabhu.
While so excellently ruling the universe, King Prevrata once became dissatisfied with the circumambulation of the most powerful sun god. Encircling Sumeru hill on his chariot, the sun god illuminates all the surrounding planetary systems. However, when the sun is on the northern side of the hill, the south receives less light. And when the sun is in the south, the north receives less. King Prevrata disliked this situation and therefore decided to make daylight in the part of the universe where there was night. He followed the orbit of the sun god on a brilliant chariot and thus fulfilled his desire. He could perform such wonderful activities because of the power he had achieved by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
So two things come from this verse. One is the extraordinary activities of Priyavrata, and the second is the mercy of the Lord. That why was Priyavrata able to do such extraordinary activities? Only because, as it is said, he could perform such wonderful activities because he had achieved the powers by worshipping the personality of Godhead. So what did he do? So he was dissatisfied. So later on, when we'll study the structure of the universe, then we'll see that in the middle of the universe is Mount Meru. Mount Meru is coming from Bhumandal, which is where the causal ocean, not the causal ocean, the Garbhoda ocean is. From there, it goes all the way up to Dhruvaloka, a little lower than uh, Janaloka, right? Yeah, little lower than Janaloka. And the sun, it rotates around the Meru mountain. So when it was on the northern side of the mountain, the southern side would become dark. And when it was on the south, the northern side would be dark. So Priyavrata, by his yogic power, he expanded into becoming a second sun. Right? So we see, does anybody know where else do we see this ability of a person to expand from one to many?
Krishna himself.
Where?
No, I say Krishna himself. No?
That's, yeah, we see that in his Dwarka Leela, Krishna expands.
Ras Leela also.
In the Ras Leela, we see that. So we also see that in Kardama Muni, right? He expands into 9 forms to enjoy with Devahuti. We see that with Saubhari Rishi. And Saubhari Rishi, when he was underwater performing austerities, and then he cursed Garud, and because of that offense, he lost his concentration, and he came out with a desiring to enjoy. And he was a great yogi. So King Manhatta, he offered his 50 daughters to Strawberry to marry, and he expanded into 50 bodies, the 50 Strawberry rishis, and married. So this is one of the yogic siddhis. Priyavrata displayed the same, that he expanded into two. One was the king that was ruling, and the second was the sun that moved in the area where the actual sun had set. So uh, because of this, in the hot months like Jeshta, the sun made by Priyavrata Maharaj was cooler than the moon. And in the cold months like Margashira, the sun made by Priyavrata was warmer than the other sun at dawn and dusk. So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that this seems to indicate that those days were getting longer in summer. It was not excessively hot. And though the days were getting shorter in winter, it was not excessively cold. And Vishwanath Chakravarti also makes the point that Priyavrata Maharaj did not do this to compete with the sun god, but to give pleasure to the devotees. And so Prabhupada expands on this point that Maharaj Priyavrata devised a very powerful chariot as brilliant as the sun, but he had no desire to compete with the sun god. For a Vaishnava never wants to supersede another Vaishnava. His purpose was to give abundant benefits in material existence. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks that in the month of April and May, the rays of Maharaj Priyavrata's brilliant sun were as pleasing as the rays of the moon. And in October and November, both morning and evening, the sun produced more warmth than the sunshine. So in other words, it made the climate more mellow. That in summer, it created a cooling influence, and in winter, it created a warming influence. Prabhupada also notes that the modern scientists, they think that everything moves around the sun, which is the heliocentric. I think it's called heliocentric around the sun. But he says from here we can understand that even the sun is moving around. And now, of course, that part is also accepted. That while the planets may move around the sun moves around the galaxy, and the galaxies move around another center in the universe. So there are many movements that are happening. And Satputra Prabhu explains also that from the point of reference, you can always change what is stationary and what is not. And if you are standing on Earth, you can make this valid observation that the sun is moving around the Earth, but then you have to modify the path of the sun across the other planets, because you have to carry that reference point to the other planets also. Right? So he gives it's a fairly long explanation that he gives, that how from the point of reference, you can take any arbitrary point of reference, you can make it static, and then you can redefine the movements of the other astral bodies. But the point here is made is to show the glories of Maharaj Priyavrata, that it's in order to serve the devotees, to reduce the discomfort because of extreme heat and cold, he actually became the second sun that was moving in the place where the first sun was not present. Okay, let me pause here and see if there's any discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. It's very interesting. These are, I've never heard this. There are two suns, one moving in a different place, giving coolness and warmth in a different season. But my question is different question actually, although I was appreciating this regarding Priyavrata accepting Grahastha, although he was supposed to be, he was aiming for a sannyas life, and he did a very, he engaged himself fully in that Grahastha ashram. He was not doing it, any with less attention. So we hear this quite often from Maharaj, also from others also, that you should not put two legs in two different boats. We also hear that two-pocket program. Maharaj is very famous example. Don't keep two-pocket program. Always one pocket for you, one for Krishna, you and Krishna. So what does it mean for Grahastha, for practicing devotees like us? The two-pocket program, what does it mean, or how does it look? How to, or how does a one-pocket program look? Can you please? I have always had this question. I have some idea, but I don't think I have clarity on that.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, I think I was attending that seminar when Maharaj gave this very nice example: a pocket for Krishna and a pocket for myself, which a lot of us can probably relate to. Which means that we compartmentalize our life, and Monday to Friday we are going to work, and then we are fully engrossed in the materialistic aspect of work. And then maybe Sunday we go to the temple and we are more in the spiritual environment. And then after that, it's back to the other pocket. And the one pocket program is essentially what is being described in this chapter, which is Devi Varnashram, where everything all the time is being done only for the pleasure of Krishna, regardless of the nature of the activity. The activity is being done for the same purpose. So whether it is engaging in your professional activities, whether it is household affairs, whether it is going to the temple, earning money, the intention is always the same: to serve the Vaishnavas, to serve Krishna. The difference is essentially that of consciousness. That even when one is working, then one is conscious of the fact that one is working because of this and this reason, that it allows me to get some Lakshmi, it helps me support my family, and helps me make them Krishna conscious, helps me support the temple. So that way, you're even when you're working, it is as if you're doing Sankirtan. Or if you're with your family, then you're creating opportunities for them to make spiritual advancement. Does not mean that whenever you're sitting with them, you're having Bhagavad Gita discourses, but you're creating an environment that is conducive to them. Like Priyavrata, he was enjoying with his wife in what looked like a materialistic way, but all the time his focus was to increase his own Krishna consciousness and that of his family. So that's essentially what Devi Varnashram, the process of Devi Varnashram is glorified in this chapter.
So my understanding is that that's the process. It happens slowly and matures to a better level as we practice it. Right now, my question is, right now it's mixed. It's not, I don't think I still have one pocket program, although I'm doing daily worship, I'm doing all these things that you're mentioning. The consciousness is still not there. There is some level of, or actually I should say a lot of contamination, and the two pocket program is very much there. So to making transition to one pocket program, so that no matter what we are, where we are fully engaged in Krishna service. So what is that? What does how to get to that stage? Any?
So I would probably challenge you a little bit over there, saying that you're probably more in the one pocket program than you realize. And sometimes what devotees make this distinction, that if I'm not chanting, if I'm not in the temple, if I'm not serving devotees, then I'm in the second pocket, right? But the matter of fact is that even if you're doing work that has nothing to do with uh, with Krishna, we carry the consciousness with us. How do we react if somebody comes and behaves in a certain way to us? How do we compete? Are we in the rat race? Are we competing with everybody, saying that I need to be better than you? Are we blinded by ambition, saying that I need to be best, my success has to be your failure? So that's the two pocket program. Right? At one point you're a complete materialist, at the other point you're trying to be a spiritualist. As we practice, of course, it's important to recognize that there is progress that needs to be made and be humble, but uh, uh, we are more in the one pocket program than we realize. And the way to understand that is taking a step away and comparing yourself with others who are more strongly in either the one pocket program, which is only material pocket, or those who are practicing what is conventional spirituality, right? Um, they either practice on weekends or something like that, and then they're completely different persons. So the nature of devotion is that it makes a change that is difficult to undo. So you cannot help yourself but be in that consciousness. And sometimes it is alarming. I must have shared this example with you. It was given by Burijan Prabhu, that when he was preaching in Hong Kong, and this was early days in the 60s, and a Gujarati boy started coming. So there was just a preaching center, no temple there, but a Gujarati boy started coming, and both Burijan Prabhu and his wife, they were cultivating him, giving him prasadam. He was very, very pious, making a lot of advancements, chanting, etc. And you could see he had a lot of attachment. And then he stopped coming. And they didn't just show up at all. So after some time, they went looking for him. They found where he was. They said, "Why have you stopped coming?" And he said, "I really like being with you, chanting, etc. My parents have spent a lot of money to send me over here to become a trader. And I found out that the most time I spent with you, it was very difficult for me to be a good trader. And in order to be a good trader, I have to be fully conscious of this all the time. I have to eat, live, sleep this. I have to be aware of how the commodity prices are moving. That needs to be my passion. So I can't afford to disappoint my parents. And I know these two things cannot coexist. And he did not come back after that. So if we look at our own lives, we will see that one way or the other, we have made adjustments in order to merge these two pockets more and more. More work needs to be done for sure. I mean, we have to understand uh, the. I mean, there are people who are actively preaching in their workplaces. Like we have a Mataji who comes in an Anamart, and wherever she goes to work, she makes devotees over there. And she goes and preaches there, gives them prasadam. So she's more focused on that one pocket. I personally not able to do that. Right? If somebody comes and asks me, I tell them, but otherwise I don't do lot of direct preaching. So definitely different people are at different points of advancement, but we can rest assured that we are definitely walking down that path.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Prabhu, just a little variations to this question about the two-pocket program. We also discussed these two things, like having one should not do any service half-heartedly, right? Not only seeing service as a service or any responsibility as a responsibility. It is like many tasks what we do are probably going into that bucket. There is one variation of this, or the other variation which we discussed in 23rd verse was where a devotee engages in all circumstances without fear. But it doesn't happen like as you said in your example, it all brings up how our conscious grows. Like this is only the it's not a question, the clarification here. Like, are these the two variations as well?
Yeah, I think you summarized it pretty well.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Just another way, same question is put forward is how do we balance material life, our spiritual life and the material life, or whatever life? And I think Maharaj gave a very good answer. He said he does not like this word balance. You should not balance. I think the word he used, he said integrate. You have to integrate both together instead of trying to balance. And what does it mean is you have to make both become one at the end of the day. Everything has to be Krishna conscious. Even the work that you're doing, you go to work. Even the work doesn't have anything to do with Krishna, but why are you going to work at the end of the day? To get a salary, of course, you will use it in your life, for your kids that are devotees, your wife that are devotees, to serve them, or to give donation to the temple, or buy food at home, you offer to Krishna. I mean, your endeavor at work at the end of the day is become Krishna's. It's not anymore a two-pocket program of balancing. It's spiritual. It's become spiritualized. It all depends how you see it, and try to always see like you have a house, a nice house. You have a temple in the house. When you're doing gardening for your house, you think if your deity is Radha Govinda or Nitai Gora Sundara, Nitai Sachisuta, think that you are cleaning your house for them. You're decorating your house for them. You're earning for them. Then there's no more two-pocket program. It's like integrate.
Yeah, I think I like the way that um, you presented it, that we should not talk about it as balancing, but integrating. Balancing implicitly means that there are two things that you want to balance. Integrating means there's only one thing, right? And that's essentially what Nandagopal Prabhu was saying. That's the one pocket, the one pocket program.
I was sorry, Prabhu. Continue.
So I was saying, Maharaj was once giving this example of he went to the house of a devotee, and he was living simply, but he had developed this habit that he would basically prepend everything with Krishna, that welcome to Krishna's house, and by Krishna's desire, and this is Krishna's living room, this is Krishna's garden, this is Krishna Prasadam. So so maybe it's not clear what his internals was, but Maharaj was saying just the fact that he constantly kept reminding himself, whether it was his house or food or his sofa or anything, it was Krishna dash there. So it was one way of doing this integration, as you were saying.
I was this process that Prabhupada gave is a very wonderful process of how we can integrate our day-to-day life in Krishna consciousness by having a temple at home. That makes it more of a practical way of doing things. But I noticed what is in the mind is the one which troubles sometimes. So when we, especially with the loved ones, the expectations are there in the mind and they are not meeting the expectations, especially in the spiritual realm, not necessarily in the so that then the complaints come in the mind. Oh, why this is happening, why that is happening. So then I realized that then the two-pocket program, it is still not a one-pocket program. Whenever I have the complaints about so many things at work or at home, I feel that the two-pocket program is still existing in me. I don't know whether I am right, and this is the feeling I get. And so this somehow that has to go, that complaining tendency, because I'm eventually complaining against Krishna, not against anybody else. This so that's why I'm thinking like this. And so anyway, I was
One way to address it is that instead of complaining against Krishna, complain to Krishna. So it's okay to complain, but you can go and complain to Krishna. What Krishna? Why is this person behaving like this? And whatever it is. So you get the best of both the worlds. You get to complain also, and you're able to complain to Krishna, so you can probably do something about it also.
Just adding in one thing, I like Bahari Prabhu one time gave an example is you don't see that you are changing, just like you don't see your nail growing, but it grows. You don't see every day how long it is growing, but at the maybe after 2 weeks, 1 week you have to clip it. That means it's grown. Same thing, the habits, is there, but slowly it's changing. You don't see it, but if you look back, you will see there has been some change, or at least some improvement. Don't worry, just continue chanting, offer your food, go to work with that. It will come. You will get there. Don't worry. But Hari Prabhu's famous example, you don't see how fast your nail is growing. I like this.
thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So coming back, I'm hoping we'll complete this chapter. I think we should. We have only 10 more verses, 11 verses left. Okay, so let's do translation for verse 31.
When Prevrata drove his chariot behind the sun, the rims of his chariot wheels created impressions that later became 7 oceans, dividing the planetary system known as Bhumandala into 7 islands.
So this is the second thing that Maharaj Prevrata did, the second wonderful thing that he did. One was described in the previous verse, that he illuminated the part of the universe that was not illuminated by the sun. Now, this is a little bit more mystical, difficult to understand, that he drove his chariot behind the sun, and the rims of the wheel, it divided the Bhumandal into 7 oceans and 7 islands. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, he talks, he describes this extensively, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure if I understand it completely, but I will share with you to the extent that I understand. So he says that that this means that he had 7 chariots, and each of the chariot had 1 wheel in it. The movement of the chariot was higher than the sun's as they circle around the Bhumandal. Then he quotes Jiva Goswami. So Jiva Goswami says in Sandarbha that one should also understand that the chariots were successively larger and larger in size because so these are concentric circles, and as you go to the outer circles, the radius increases. The circles are also larger and larger. So in order to in order to maintain the same speed and while traveling larger circles, the chariots were also larger and larger. So uh, uh, each chariot was twice the size of the previous one, and each one was traveling higher than the previous one, so that the inhabitants of the city of Aryavrata could see. So Aryavrata is the city where Priyavrata uh, resided. So because the wheels of the chariot were broader, so the groove that they were making in Bhumandal was essentially an ocean. And as you go outside, each of the ocean is larger than the previous ocean, twice the size of the previous ocean. So and we'll do this in the in the 20th chapter, I believe. We will do a description of this in more details. But essentially, if you look at the Bhumandal as a plane, as maybe as a circular disk, and then there are concentric circles with Mount Meru in the center. So each of the circle represents the ocean, and the land between it is called Dvipa. So there are seven sagas and 7 Dvipas. Then Vishwanath Chakravarti says that he rode each one of this chariot for 25 days and 45 and a half ghatikas. So ghatika is another measurement of time. So basically it translates to half a year. So starting from the summer equinox, when the sun is descending, until the month of Pausha. And then in the winter equinox, he would travel on the other side until the cycle was completed for the 6 months. So the 7 times in the previous verse means that he traveled in 7 chariots. Right? So there's no contradiction to say that Maharaj Priyavrata was pursuing the sun for only 7 days, right? And then he gave up that. But it means that he was following the sun in 7 chariots. So Bhanu Swami comments on this, saying that that it appears from this that before the appearance of Priyavrata Maharaj, the days and nights were equal. But he made the lengths of the days and night change throughout the year. Okay. Moving on to the next verse, 32.
The names of the islands are Jambu, Laksha, Salmali, Usha, Prauncha, Saka, and Pushkara. Each island is twice as large as the one preceding it, and each is surrounded by a liquid substance beyond which is the next island.
So right now, they are being mentioned more to glorify Priyavrata, right? So the island that is right at the middle is called Jambudvipa, and this will be described more in the 16th chapter. And then the outer islands, the Shalmali, Kusha, Krauncha, Shak, and Pushkar, they will be described in the 20th chapter. So as I mentioned, each one of them are called Dvipa, and they are surrounded by, so where the chariot's wheel ran, there it made a groove that was filled by a liquid substance, right? So, and next verse will tell us what the liquids are, but essentially these are the ocean. So all this is happening on Bhumandal. This is happening on the planet where Earth is situated. Sometimes you will see that it's translated to Bhumandal is translated to Earth. So you'll see sometimes people saying that the chariot of Maharaj Priyavrata ran on the surface of Earth planet and divided it into 7 continents, and then there are 7 mountain ranges. But that's not accurate, because Earth is actually, or the Earth that we live on, it's actually a very small portion of a portion of Bhumandal. So it is there in Jambudvipa, and the Jambudvipa is further divided into many kshetras, and one of the kshetras, part of one of the kshetras is Earth. So this does not refer to Earth; it refers to the Bhumandal, but it does not include the upper planetary or the lower planetary system, right? It does not include Svargalok or Patal Lok, none of this. It's essentially the middle planetary system of Bhumandal. Okay, verse 33.
The 7 oceans respectively contain salt, water, sugarcane juice, liquor, clarified butter, milk, emulsified yogurt, and sweet drinking water. All the islands are completely surrounded by these oceans, and each ocean is equal in breadth and to the island it surrounds. Maharaja Priyavrata, the husband of Queen Brahmati, gave sovereignty over these islands to his respective sons, namely Agnidhra, Idmajva, Yajnabahu, Hiranvareta, Ghृतprastha, Medhatiti, and Vitihotra. Thus they all became kings by the order of their father.
So these are the 7 oceans of water, sugarcane juice, liquor, ghee, milk, and emulsified butter, and sweet drinking water. Srila Prabhupada mentions that even though it is said that the ocean is the same in the breadth to the island that it surrounds, but it is not the same in length. So he quotes Veera Raghavacharya, and for obvious reasons, because it is encircling the land, so it is running on a wider, it has a longer radius, so its length will be longer, but its breadth is the same. And the breadth of the first island, Jambudvip, is 100 yojanas. So from there you can calculate. So this is 100 yojanas. The first ocean of salt water is also 100,000 yojanas. Then the next island that comes after that is 200,000 yojanas, and so on. This. So like I said, this we will look at it in greater details when we do the 16th chapter. But here the point is made that each of this tract of land was given to his respective sons. So these tracts of lands are known as uh, um, Bhaumya Swarga. So there are 3 Swargas. There is the Divya Swarga, there is the Bhaumya Swarga, and there is the Bilva Swarga. So the Bilva Swarga is the heavenly experience in the lower planetary system. The Divya Swarga is where Indra lives, and this is Bhaumya Swarga, where in this whole Bhumandal, with the exception of where we live, everything else is considered to be Bhaumaswarga. People have long lives. They don't have they have death, but they don't have any old age or disease. They live for 10,000 years. They have perfect health. They have strong senses. They're able to enjoy. And there is no karma over there. So they don't do any activities that attract any karma. The only thing that happens over there is the exhaustion of karma. Okay, verse 34.
King Priyavrata then gave his daughter Urjaswati in marriage to Shukracharya, who begot in her daughter named Devavani.
So this is the famous Devyani. We studied about it, daughter of Shukracharya, and that lineage, that Kshatriya lineage that comes down from there.
My dear
So
king,
she marries Yayati, and from Yayati, then the various sons come, and so there is this whole pastime that is explained in Mahabharata. But here it is explained that the Shukracharya is actually the son-in-law of Maharaj Priyavrata. Priyavrata's daughter Ujaswati married Shukracharya. Okay, please continue, Prabhu.
my dear king, a devotee who has taken shelter of the dust from the lotus feet of the Lord can transcend the influence of the 6 material waves, namely hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death, and he can conquer the mind and 5 senses. However, this is not very wonderful for a pure devotee of the Lord, because even a person beyond the jurisdiction of the 4 castes, in other words, an untouchable, is immediately relieved of bondage to material existence if he utters the holy name of the Lord even once.
So, seeing all these accomplishments of Maharaj Priyavrata, one may be amazed that he became the second son. He divided the Bhumandal with his chariot into 7 oceans, 7 islands. And then Sukadeva Goswami, in the mood of a devotee, he constantly brings one's attention back to Krishna. Right? So he says that there may be activities that are amazing, but all this is really possible because he took shelter of the personality of God. Essentially meaning that Priyavrata is reflecting a portion of the greatness of the Lord. Right? His greatness really was taking shelter of the Lord. And because of that, he was able to achieve this wonderful activities. So Prabhupada writes that because of the material body, every living entity in material existence is always disturbed by sadgunas, 6 waves: hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, invalidity, and death. Then furthermore, there are other sadgunas, which is the mind and the 5 senses. Not to speak of a sanctified devotee, even a chandal, an outcast who is untouchable, is immediately freed from material bondage if he utters the holy name of the Lord even once. So we see how the ultimate purpose of the Srimad Bhagavatam is to attract the mind of the reader to the lotus feet of the Lord. And then, like it's once is described that uh, expert teachers, they teach through humor. So they will give something for the person to laugh, and while the person's mouth is open and laughing, then they will put some knowledge there. So expert preachers, they're also doing the same thing. And while our mouths are open with awe and amazement about the greatness of Maharaj Priyavrata, Sukadeva Goswami, he presents us the potency of taking shelter of Krishna. So what happens? One transcends the 6 material causes of suffering and conquers the mind and 5 senses. So in the verse, the first half of the verse glorifies surrender. And the second half glorifies the potency of the holy name. So Sukadeva Goswami says, Sakrata Dita. So Sakrata Dita means uttering the holy name only once. Right? So how much more for one who utters regularly? So when Vishwanath Chakravarti comments on this, he says that Sukadeva Goswami is using Virodha Alankar. So Virodha Alankar means an ornament introducing contradiction. So when he says that even an outcast So outcast means prarabdha karma is not good. Outcast is chandal. Prarabdha karma is not good. So the lowest, by chanting the holy name only once, not that he has to chant 20 million times, only once, he is immediately relieved of the bondage of material existence. Now, the interesting point here is, and this is also food for thought for us as practicing devotees, that we can say that maybe we are chandals, maybe we are not chandals, but we are definitely chanting the holy name more than once. So if a chandal chants only once and he is immediately relieved of bondage of material existence, why not for us? And Prabhupada says, absolutely, it is happening for us also. So then one might say that, but I still have my body. I don't see a new body. I don't see forearms. I don't see a Divya Sharir. So then Prabhupada explains that because the holy name is spiritual, the chanting of the holy name is understood to refer to the subtle body and not the gross body. So then one might ask, then why is it not said that the subtle body changes? Why is it said that the gross body changes? So the explanation to that is that the gross body is essentially a representation of the subtle body. And we know in Bhagavad Gita, when the gross body is gone, it's the subtle body that carries the soul to another gross body, right? Based on various things. So it's the subtle body that architects the gross body, right? Based on that, it gets a particular kind of senses, a particular anatomy. So when you're saying that the subtle body is changing, you're also right in saying that the gross body is changing. But actually, it's the change is happening at a subtle level. So when the time comes for the subtle body to leave the gross body, then it will take on, it will go to a body that is, Prabhupada says that's a spiritual body. I mean, essentially the subtle body gives up the soul. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that Sanatana Goswami confirms this, that when a person, even though a chandal, is initiated by a pure devotee into chanting the holy name of the Lord, his body changes as he follows the instructions of the spiritual master. Although one cannot see how this body has changed, we must accept on the grounds of the authoritative statements of the Shastras that he changes his body. This is to be understood without arguments. This verse very clearly says, Sajahati Bandham, that he gives up his material bondage. The body is a symbolic representation of material bondage according to one's karma, right? It is part of karma. Although sometimes we cannot see the gross body changing, chanting the holy name of the Supreme Lord immediately changes the subtle body. So subtle body is used here to indicate consciousness. That's where the consciousness resides. And because the subtle body changes, the living entity is immediately free from all material bonding. After all, the changes of the gross body are conducted by the subtle body. After the destruction of the gross body, the subtle body takes the living entity from the present gross body to another. In the subtle body, the mind is predominant. And therefore, if one's mind is always absorbed in remembering the activities of the lotus feet of the Lord, he is understood to have already changed his present body and become purified. Therefore, it is irrefutable that a chandal or any fallen or low-born person can become a brahmana. And so this is clearly refuting the points that is made by the more karmakandis, that if you're born in the body of a chandal, you can never be qualified to perform yagyas. The only way you can be performed, we can do is to give up that body, take birth in a Brahmin family, and then you can do Brahmanic activities. But even a Chandal is chanting because his subtle body has changed, his gross body has changed. So now he's a Brahmin. So he can do all Brahmanical activities. Okay, so moving on towards okay, I don't think we have time. Okay, so we're close to the end. I'll stop over here and see if anybody has any closing thoughts.
Probably this reinforced what we were speaking earlier, that two pocket program also. I mean, you have to have faith in what Sanatan Goswami is saying, that you chant, just hope. Not hope, you're sure it will happen. You have to be sure. If you're not sure, that means we don't trust the word of the Goswamis. Just like the story of Krishna said, I carry what you like, I preserve what you have. And there's the story of the Brahmana that kept this line without trusting the word of Krishna. Same thing. Even though we don't see, we have to trust.
Absolutely, it does reinforce. So I think the discussion was inspired by Paramatma to get this verse coming in. Okay, so we'll end here. Thank you very much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnavind ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Jai Gaur Premanand. Thank you very much.